Iran's top leader has said the country will attack 10 times over if is targeted by its enemies, a threat directed at the U.S. and Israel after Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. In a televised speech, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei urged the nation's youth to stand up to pressure from the U.S. in the aftermath of Mr. Trump's decision last month to exit from the landmark seven-party accord. The decision resulted in the reimposition of sanctions that had been lifted as part of the deal. Tehran will attack 10 times more if attacked by enemies. The enemies don't want an independent Iran in the region, said Mr. Khamenei, according to Reuters. We will continue our support to oppressed nations. Our enemies have staged economic and psychological warfare against us, and new American sanctions are part of it. Iran's supreme leader lists demands for staying in nuclear deal since the U.S. announced it was withdrawing from the 2015 agreement. The EU, along with Russia, China and Iran, have been discussing whether the deal is still workable without the involvement of the U.S., which has great leverage over global financial transactions. One of the endeavors being pursued by the EU is the revival of legislation that would allow European companies to continue doing business with Iran, despite U.S. sanctions. The so-called blocking statute was introduced in 1996 to circumvent U.S. sanctions on Cuba but was never used. Reports suggest an updated version of the measure should be enforced before the 6th of August, when the first sanctions take effect. President Donald Trump states if Iran restarts their nuclear program there will be severe consequences. We have the duty, the Commission and the European Union, to do what we can to protect our European businesses, especially SMEs, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said in a statement, referring to small and medium-sized companies. The comments from Mr. Khamenei came as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu traveled to Europe for meetings in Germany, France and the UK. Mr. Netanyahu, who was among the loudest voices calling on the US to pull out of the Iran deal and praising Mr. Trump for doing so, met on Monday with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Before he left for Europe, Mr. Netanyahu met with his cabinet and tweeted about his determination to stop Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. Iran has always insisted it has no nuclear ambitions, beyond developing the technology for providing energy. Missiles rise into the sky as Israeli missiles hit air defense position and other military bases. In Damascus, missile fire is seen from Damascus. An Israeli flag is seen placed on Mount Bentel in the Israeli-annexed Golan Heights. Israel's army said today it had carried out widespread raids against Iranian targets in Syria overnight after rocket fire towards its forces it blamed on Iran, marking a sharp escalation between the two enemies. Israel carried out the raids after it said around 20 rockets, either Farj or Grad type, were fired from Syria at its forces in the occupied Golan Heights at around midnight. The Israeli military on Thursday said it attacked dozens of Iranian targets in neighboring Syria in response to an Iranian rocket barrage on Israeli positions in the Golan Heights. Israeli artillery deployed missiles towards Syrian military targets. On the Golan Heights, missile fire is seen over Dara air defense systems intercepting Israeli missiles over Syrian airspace. Israeli soldiers walk among armored vehicles in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Syrian air defense missiles are seen in the sky over the capital Damascus. Air defense systems intercepting Israeli missiles over Syrian airspace. Israeli missile strikes fired at Syria hit military bases, as well as an arms depot and military radar. This week I will meet with 3 European leaders: Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel and Theresa May, Netanyahu said. Israel will not let Iran obtain nuclear arms. After meeting between the German and Israeli leaders, Ms. Merkel said she agreed with Mr. Netanyahu that Iran's activities in the Middle East were a concern, particularly for Israel. While it has never admitted possessing them, Israel is the only country in the region that is armed with nuclear weapons. We agree that the question of Iran's regional influence is worrying, especially for Israel's security. Mr. Merkel told a joint news conference with Mr. Netanyahu after their meeting in Berlin.